So here's some more tips on approaching a location or a event from a more personal manner. Once you've made your shots, I would select your best images, and I would say somewhere between 20 and 50 is a good number to work with usually. And then edit down to an even smaller selection, say between 5 and 20. And that number is good for slideshows, it's good for small exhibitions, it's good for a chapter in a photo book that you might be working on. We probably all remember the experience of dads or granddads bringing out every single slide they shot on their holiday, even the ones that weren't any good, and people nodding off. So less is always more. You always want to show less images, and that way really retain the viewer's attention. Then what I do, once I've got my selection down to a smaller number, I then simply move the images around. So you can do that on the desktop, like get a series of thumbnails on the desktop and move them around, or you can make small prints and like cards, lay them out on a tabletop. Move them around, form little series of images. I often work in odd numbers like threes. So here's 3 images, then there's a space, then there's another 3 images. And you're doing that in a way to help you realize the images into a cohesive body of work, which we can call a portfolio. Now, if there's 1 or 2 images that just don't seem to fit, it's often best to take them out. Even if you have an attachment to them, that attachment may actually be at the cost of the success of the portfolio. So sometimes it's best to take 1 or 2 shots out that you just can't fit in and maybe incorporate them into another body of work. Now, this approach works equally well for family events, holidays, and much more personal artistic investigations, if you like. I guess my approach is whatever I'm photographing, I tend to approach it in a personal manner, and that's where my images are probably a little bit different to the average snapshot. Now, once you've created this body of work, this little portfolio, it's worthwhile spending a moment trying to identify the approach you've taken in creating it. So the approach for this body of work that you've just witnessed, of course, was design-based. And then recognize the story, the theme, or the message that you've explored. Now, sometimes we come to a particular location with an with objectives in mind, but in other cases we just show up and we take photographs. That's okay. But through the act of editing the body of work down to a small selection, through the act of enhancing that edit through better sequencing of the images so that they make sense together, so they form a cohesive portfolio, then it's worthwhile sitting back and looking at the images with new eyes and actually extracting what it is that the images are about. And, often you'll be quite surprised by what has been revealed. So that portfolio will actually say something about you, what your concerns are, what your interests are, what you're happy about, what you're angry about, all of those things. It'll say something about you as an artist and as a person. And, that's when the images become particularly interesting. So after a brief time in Port Stanley, I guess, we had a couple hours in all, but, I was working, so I was spending quite a bit of my time catching up to participants and helping them with their own photographic journey. I was still keen to have a bit of time at one of the local pubs because that's certainly a major part of English culture. So I caught up with a few of the crew and some of the other participants in the tour, in the pub, and I was happy to sample some of the local brew. I had a couple jars, and I had a bit of a feed prior to heading off down to South Georgia, in fact, which was an incredible place to photograph. So here we have on the left side of the frame some of the crew from Aurora Expeditions. In fact, when I say the crew itself, those that sailed the ship were Russian, fantastic bunch of guys, and the workers on the ship, the domestics, were Russian, mostly Russian women. But the folks who actually handled the tour, if you like, looked after the paying customers, were Australians, English, and a lovely Scottish lady who lives in Australia. So some of those guys are on the left-hand side of the frame. On the right-hand side, there's a very nice English couple who were paying customers. Now, there were 3 tours, in fact, on the ship. There was the photography tour, of which I was one of the leaders. There was a kayaking tour, which those 2 guys belonged to. And there was a fantastic bunch of Russian folks who were underwater divers. So it was just great fun to be able to intermingle, between the groups. It was just a fantastic bunch of people. We got to know each other pretty well by the end of the tour, which was 19 days. So the last thing to do was to get back to our ship, the Polar Pioneer, and head off to South Georgia. Now, I'd like to present more of these talks over coming weeks, so just please let me know via commenting if you've enjoyed the talk, and any recommendations or suggestions I'd greatly appreciate, because this is the first one I've done. Last couple points I'd make is it's not so much what you photograph, whether it be people, landscapes, wildlife, etc. It's much more about how you photograph, the approach you take, and ultimately why you photograph. And the why is really what makes our work art. The problem is the why is the hardest thing, and trying to think why we do what we do is actually a cause of us not doing anything at all. So my suggestion is just get out there and shoot, just work intuitively, make photographs, edit them down, and then at the end of the process, understand why you've done what you've done. The why doesn't have to be the beginning. Like the question mark, the why is at the end of the process. Nothing wrong with that at all. So, when we talk about the why and the how, what was our approach and what were our motivations and outcomes? What does the portfolio tell us about ourselves? And what does it tell the world about ourselves? That's really when photography starts to become a joy. So I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation. You can find me on my blog, travelphotographyguru.com, Facebook, and if you haven't, for those who use Facebook, I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd find me there, Travel Photography Guru, and also on Twitter. The address is Travel Photo Guru. I tweet usually about half a dozen times a day, and I try to do a Facebook entry pretty much every day as well. And the more people I get that follow me on Facebook and Twitter, the more time I'll be able to devote to those versions of social media. So thanks once again, and I look forward to talking with you all soon. Bye for now.